All right, hey, thanks for joining us. I'm Ernest Lunning with Colorado Politics, here today with Congressman Greg Lopez, one of the Republicans running to be Colorado's next governor. He's going to be answering questions prepared by AARP Colorado. We'll be asking the same questions to the other candidates who are running for the chance to take over from term-limited Governor Jared Polis. Congressman Lopez, please take a minute to introduce yourself and tell us why you're running.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here, Ernest. My name is Greg Lopez. I've been in Colorado 38 years. I've seen the state change and evolve. And really, I'm running because I want to put people over politics. And my governing is do no harm. But as I see what's going on in this state, I believe there's a lot of issues that are negatively impacting the quality of life of thousands of families across the entire state. And so what I want to do is make sure that people can understand that government is here to help them, not work against them in whatever manner we can, but improve the quality of life of every single family throughout the state of Colorado.
New data shows that there's more than 1 million family caregivers in Colorado. What kind of policies and legislation would you champion to ease caregiver burdens?
Ernest, it's interesting because my mom and dad were caregivers. I had a little brother that when he was born, he couldn't see, he couldn't hear, and he couldn't speak. And I know the challenges that families go through. So what I want to make sure is that caregivers are really given the opportunity not only to feel that they can provide for their children, provide for their parents if they need to, but more importantly, not have that financial stress. So I'm hearing right now that a lot of the funding is being cut or they're being mandated by only a certain number of hours throughout the day. I think that's something that I want to reevaluate to make sure that their quality of life, both the caregiver and the individual that they're taking care of, that their quality of life is the best that we can offer from a state. I think Coloradans truly believe in family. They believe in taking care of each other to the best of our ability. So those are some of the legislation that I want to look at to see what are we currently doing, and let's make sure we do no harm to those families in any budget process or anything that we're doing when it comes to healthcare.
Older Coloradans are not immune to the housing affordability crisis. What policy solutions will you seek to help Coloradans age 50 and older find and keep affordable housing?
Affordable is a terminology that seems it doesn't really have a definition anymore. Some people say it's affordable, others say it can't. One of the biggest challenges that I believe seniors are facing is the utilities costs, right? The electric bills, the gas bills. Those are things that, even if they're not using as much as they used to, oftentimes you get charged the same amount, right? And so what we need to evaluate is when a senior has a home, is there ways for us to be able to allow them to rent one of the rooms or create another dwelling internally, maybe convert the garage into another apartment unit where they can receive some form of additional income? There's a lot of creative ways that we can do to make affordability for seniors something that they can do. And a lot of times, seniors do not want to leave their homes. That's where they raise their children. That's where all their memories are. And we should not force them to have to leave because of gentrification. Oftentimes inside the inner city, they buy new homes and they upgrade them. And then the taxes, sometimes they have to leave because they can't afford the property tax. We're in a crisis. There's a lot that we need to do to make sure we help seniors stay and keep the homes that they raise their family in.
This question is along those lines. As the number of Coloradans over the age of 50 increases, what can be done to help them age in place and remain in their communities?
Well, I think what we can do is make sure that they understand that they're still valuable. They still bring a lot of history into our communities. We need to promote them. We need to challenge them. One of the things that I have always tried to do is be a mentor, right? Is talk to the younger generation and just share stories, just share experiences so that they have a better foundation by which they can make decisions. Right now you see a lot of seniors, people over 50, there really aren't a whole lot of recreational activities for them. If you notice, a lot of the bowling alleys no longer exist. A lot of the things that people used to go out and do, that doesn't require a lot of physical activity are gone. And so what we need to do is make sure that we recognize that they have a lot of history in our communities and encourage them to be a part of the community and not feel that, you know what, their time's done. They can go home and sit on the front porch. That's not what it's about. They bring a lot of value to the future of their communities.
What do you see as the biggest public health problem, challenge facing the state, and how will you address it?
Well, just like anything else, right? Healthcare is going through the ceiling. You know, when you look at the numbers, why is it that healthcare's expenses exceed inflation? You know, while inflation is at 3% or 4%, it seems that health insurance and cost is at 16, 18%. You have to ask, why is that? You know, the prescription drugs, those are also going through the ceiling. We need to evaluate that. You know, I think what we need to do as a state and as communities, we need to encourage people to eat healthy, to eat healthier foods, you know, to make sure that they understand that what they put in their bodies does have an impact. You know, and too many times, you and I grew up in an age where we understood the 4 food groups, right? And we always say, you know, people didn't like us to eat a lot of sugar and that type of stuff. We need to kind of just remind people, right, that they need to eat healthier. There's nothing wrong in not having that hamburger. There's nothing wrong in cooking at home. You know, I was talking to a physician up in the Western Slope, and he goes, you know, Greg, a lot of people don't even know how to cook anymore. You know, they always go out to eat, and that's some of the challenges that we're facing here in the state of Colorado. So I think a lot of the health issue stems first on what are we eating, what do we put in our bodies, and then educating people on how to do that in moderation, but more importantly, also exercise. You know, go out for a walk. Colorado's a beautiful state. It's got so much to offer. Go out there and enjoy it.
Okay, you've actually led us into our next question. From a legislative perspective, what can be done to improve our state as a great place for fitness, health, and well-being for Coloradans of all ages?
You know, I think what we can do is, first of all, let people know that recreation is important. It should be part of your daily routine. You know, we used to have PSAs. You probably remember some of the public service announcements. We don't do those anymore, right? We need to encourage people. You know, ask a question every night. How many steps did you do today? You know, what did you do today for exercising? Because people forget, you know, look, the world is moving fast. You know it and I know it, right? I mean, before long, you've been watching your cell phone for an hour. You've been looking at the screen for 2 hours. And so we need to get people to get up and walk around. I think what we need to do also is make sure that there are more sports activities in the schools. You know, let's have recess more often. Let's let the kids go out there and be kids, right? And not put all these restrictions. If we start letting kids be kids, I think we'll see that the parents will also be more active because the children want to go out to the parks. The children want to play catch with their dads. They want to hit the ball around. You know, I don't see families playing Frisbee anymore. You know, it's like Frisbee used to be a fun, inexpensive sport. You could go out to the park and enjoy the entire day. You know, these are the types of things. We got to get back to the basics. You know, we can't ask people to spend a lot of money just to enjoy recreation, enjoy Colorado. We got to let them know, you know, there's a lot of different ways that you can enjoy the beauty of what Colorado has to offer and experience the mountains, experience the vistas, you know, and if you can go out into the mountains, you know where you're going, you know, plan it out, you know, unless you want to be a real adventurer, you know, because sometimes the weather shifts very quickly here in Colorado, but there's so much to offer. Even as I travel the state, I see new things every time I travel the state, which is amazing for our great state of Colorado.
Well, thank you. The legislature is tackling major consumer safety issues as technology rapidly evolves, such as putting on guardrails when businesses and government use AI to make major decisions that impact people. What's your philosophy on balancing consumer rights and technological innovation?
You know, I'm glad you asked that. You know, when I was in Congress, not only did I sit in the Budget Committee, but I also sat on the Space, Science, and Technology Committee. So AI was a big discussion in our committees. You know, and I'm concerned about AI. There's a lot of people that think it's the best thing that ever happened. But I look at it as we just let the genie out of the bottle. We're not sure exactly how positive it's going to be. But I do think, you know what, when you use it, you need to use it carefully. And I do believe that from a consumer standpoint, we need to be aware of, to the best of our ability, when it's being used. Because right now, AI technology can be used to make phone calls, to do scams, to do those types of things. And so we must be able to recognize that there are some limitations, and there's things that a lot of us don't know. Even those that claim that they understand AI, they truly don't understand it to the breadth and depth that we are going to need to understand it in the next 5 to 10 years.
Thank you. Groups like the AARP consistently hear from members the rising utility costs pose affordability challenges for Coloradans on a fixed income.
Mm-hmm.
In addition, inadequate heating and cooling can pose significant health risks for older Coloradans.
It's true.
As governor, how would you balance competing interests from clean energy targets, data centers moving in, et cetera, to ensure affordable utilities for older Coloradans?
Well, remember, the PUC, the Public Utilities Commission, has a lot of say on what's going to happen with our utility bills, right? Mm-hmm. And so the governor appoints those individuals. And so again, my governing principle is people over politics and do no harm. A lot of people think growth is great, but when our electric grid is really in the verge of crumbling, we need to be careful about how much power we put onto that grid because of growth or expansion. I think it's important for us to understand that we must always be aware of the people that are here, specifically the seniors. Like you said, look, seniors are on fixed income. They cannot afford an increase of $5 or $10 on their gas bill and their electric bill, as well as their food bill. The quality of life is being taken away from our seniors slowly but surely, and we don't talk about that enough. We don't talk about it at the legislative halls. We don't talk about it in the governor's office. The governor's out there talking about the importance of making sure that seniors are having a great quality of life to the best of their ability. That's something I'm going to do. As a governor, the governor has two responsibilities. One, he's got the executive power, which oversees all the departments. The other is the power of influence, to remind people what is going on in this state and how it's helping or how it's hurting families across the state, specifically in rural Colorado. You talk about health issues in rural Colorado and the ability of seniors that live there and how far away they are from the hospitals. There's a lot that we need to evaluate. None of these have simple solutions, but we must have serious conversations.
Well, thank you. And our last question here, Colorado has established a first of its kind prescription drug affordability review board to review and research the cost of prescription medications and even set upper payment limits on certain medications. Do you support a board like this? Or in addition, how do you plan on further ensuring medication affordability for Coloradans?
One of the things that a lot of people forget is that for years, our medical system was a nonprofit organization. Then all of a sudden it became for-profit. So people need to understand that the hospitals, the pharmacies, all these are for-profit corporations. And so just like any company, sometimes if they feel they can raise the price and people will pay, then they'll keep raising the price. And the subsidies are really driving some of these costs through the ceiling. And so what we need to do is make sure that we recognize or that we make them be transparent. What does it actually cost to make an aspirin? What does it actually cost to do insulin? And allow them to make a profit, but they shouldn't be overly greedy on the profit and put healthcare of individuals where they're not acknowledging that their role is to make people healthy, not to take advantage of them by taking their money out of their pocket. So there's a lot of conversation that needs to happen on that. But I do support having dialogues and looking at committees that will evaluate what's happening out there in the market, because we need to know.
Well, thank you. And thank you. Please check out our interviews with other candidates for governor and candidates running in the 8th Congressional District on coloradopolitics.com and at AARP Colorado. Thanks for watching.